the smell of grease and metal has always been the scent of my freedom. In my garage, among wrenches and engine parts, I find my little sanctuary, tools neatly arranged on the walls, each in its specific spot, just like soldiers lined up. This space is more than just a place to park the car. It's where I earn my living and keep my sanity. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like to get access to more stories like this. My name's Jack, and I've been a mechanic for over 20 years. With 45 years under my belt and calluses permanently on my hands, I built my reputation fixing just about anything with an engine in our community in Austin, Texas. The neighbors call me the guy who gets it done, whether it's a temperamental lawnmower or a car that just won't start on a Monday morning. Samantha, my wife, likes to joke that I got married twice, once to her and once to my toolbox. She understands my passion, maybe because she's got her own too. A former Navy officer, Sam still carries that military discipline even after all these years in civilian life. At 43, she's in top shape and still as quick as when she served. We're quite the pair, her with her military precision and me with my laid-back Texan style. Life at Oak Haven was always calm. I'd help the neighbors with their repairs, sometimes charging, sometimes just for the satisfaction of it. Sam taught self-defense classes for the women in the neighborhood on Saturdays. We had our space, our rhythm, our peace. That was until Patricia Lawson showed up. The first letter showed up taped to my garage door on a Wednesday. It was on the Homeowners Association letterhead, with a fancy signature at the end. It said something about non-compliant equipment and potential safety hazards. "Jack, did you see this?" Sam asked, handing me the official envelope while I was wiping oil off my forearm. "It must be a mistake," I replied, still not grasping the gravity of it all. "I've been here for 8 years and never had any problems." The second letter arrived 3 days later. This one was less formal and a lot more threatening. "Dear homeowner, an external visual inspection identified dangerous tools left out in your garage in violation of the new Community Safety Code, Section 5.3. We request immediate removal or proper storage within 48 hours, or you will face a fine." That's when I met Patricia Lawson in person, the new HOA president. In her 50s, with perfectly dyed hair, driving a gleaming white SUV. She stopped in front of my house while I was installing new brake pads on Mr. Martinez's car. "Mr. Roberts," she began without coming too close, as if motor oil were contagious. "Have you received our notifications?" "I have, but I don't understand. What's exactly wrong with my tools?" "The new code approved last month classifies tools left out as potential weapons. They need to be locked up when not in use." "But I'm using them right now," I argued. "This is my livelihood." "This is a residential neighborhood, not a commercial workshop," she replied with a forced smile. "I'm sure you can find an appropriate place for your hobby." "It's not a hobby, Mrs. Lawson. It's my profession." The sound of her heel hitting the concrete as she walked away sounded like a hammer sealing my fate. The letters kept coming, each one more specific, each one more cutting. Sam suggested we talk to Roger, a lawyer friend, who confirmed that the HOA was overstepping its authority. We sent back a formal response, citing Texas property laws. The tension grew when we received a final notice. Tools will be forcibly removed if proper measures are not taken by Friday. On Thursday, I had to travel to Houston. An important client needed help with a vintage engine that only a few knew how to fix. "I hate leaving you in this mess," I admitted to Sam as I tossed tools into the trunk. "Don't worry," she replied with that determined Navy look. "I know how to take care of our home." Little did I know how prophetic those words would be. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Sam heard it. The subtle sound of metal on metal at the garage lock. The heavy rain partly masked the noise, but her years of military training sharpened her senses. She grabbed her body camera, a gift I gave her when she started doing nighttime runs, and silently slid down the stairs. 2 men dressed in dark uniforms were rifling through the tool drawers. A third one waited in a parked van with the engine running. The flight from Houston was delayed because of the storm. When I finally landed in Austin, it was almost noon on Friday. Dozens of unread messages on my phone, missed calls from neighbors I barely knew. Something big had happened. I sped home with my heart pounding. When I turned onto our street, I could barely recognize the scene. 3 police cruisers were parked in front of our house. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalks, some still in their pajamas. Cell phone cameras were pointed toward us. It looked like a movie set. I slammed on the brakes and got out of the car without even turning off the engine. "Sam!" I shouted, running through the yard. Then I saw her, sitting calmly on the porch, sipping her coffee. Unharmed, serene, as if the commotion were just another ordinary night in the neighborhood. "Hey, honey," she said with a calm only someone who's been in combat can have. "We had some unexpected visitors tonight." Next to her were two men sitting on the ground, handcuffed with plastic ties. One had a swollen lip, and the other wore an expression of complete defeat. I recognized the uniforms, private security, the kind that luxury condos hire for nighttime patrols. "What the hell happened here?" I asked, still processing the scene. A police officer approached with a notepad in hand. "You must be Jack Roberts?" I nodded, still in shock. "Your wife detained two suspects caught red-handed for breaking in and attempted theft. They claim they work for the Homeowners Association." Sam got up and handed me her tablet. "Everything's recorded, Jack. They broke into the garage with a master key. They were taking your tools." The recording showed every detail. Sam catching the men off guard, identifying herself as the owner, ordering them to stop. They tried to intimidate her, claiming they had authorization from the HOA. One of them even moved toward her, making a mistake anyone who knew Sam would avoid. Within seconds, the first intruder was down on the ground, completely immobilized. The second hesitated, but then kept coming, swinging a wrench that happened to be my own wrench. After 3 precise moves, he too was taken down. Sam's firm voice ordered them to stay on the ground while she called the police. The camera captured everything in amazing clarity. "They mentioned Patricia the whole time," Sam explained. "They said she assured them it was standard procedure for the HOA, that they had legal authorization to remove dangerous items." The sound of screeching tires interrupted our conversation. A familiar white SUV pulled up abruptly on the other side of the street. Patricia Lawson emerged, her normally composed face now twisted with a mix of rage and panic. Her high heels sank into the wet grass as she approached the officers. "Officers, there's been a terrible misunderstanding," she said, gesturing frantically. "These men are hired by the association to conduct an authorized inspection." "At 2 in the morning?" asked the older officer, raising his eyebrows. "With authorization to remove equipment from a residence?" "We have clear policies regarding dangerous items in common areas," she retorted, pulling a folder of documents from her designer bag. "Clause 17B of our bylaws allows for the removal of hazardous materials following formal notifications." "My garage isn't a common area," I interjected, feeling my blood boil. "It's private property." "And those men weren't inspecting," Sam added as she stepped closer with the tablet. "They were stuffing bags with tools worth thousands of dollars. Let me show you evidence that conveniently didn't appear in your report." Patricia's expression changed when the officer started watching the full video. The intruders were heard saying things like, "Mrs. Lawson assured us it would be quick," and "She said we could take whatever we wanted as long as we emptied the garage." "That is..." "Oh, that's manipulated," Patricia stuttered, taking a step back. "They weren't authorized to take anything, only to document violations." "Then why did one of them try to attack me with a wrench when I told them to stop?" Sam asked as she moved toward her. At that moment, I noticed several neighbors recording the scene. Among them, I recognized Mr. Patel from across the street, the guy who ran a popular community blog. Everything was being documented live. The older officer, whose badge read Sergeant Miller, closed the tablet and looked at Patricia. "Mrs. Lawson, I need you to come with me to the cruiser. We have some questions about your involvement in this incident." "This is absurd. I'm the president of the association. You can't..." "I can and I will," Miller interrupted. "We have video evidence directly linking you to a break-in. Conspiracy, at the very least." Patricia paled, looking around as if searching for support. But there was none. The neighbors who always bowed to her demands now watched in silence as she fell from grace. "My lawyer will be in touch," she murmured, as she was escorted to the cruiser. The next few days hit like an avalanche. The video of Sam confronting the intruders, edited to protect our privacy but showing all the crucial details, went viral on the community's Facebook and Instagram groups. Soon, local newspapers were calling. The story, "Former Navy Officer Protects Home from Intruders Sent by the HOA," captured the public's imagination. Reactions ranged from shock to outrage. Support messages poured in from every corner of the community. Many people revealed that they'd also suffered from Patricia's aggressive tactics in the past months. "She fined my 80-year-old mom for leaving a potted plant in the hallway," shared Jennifer Alvarez from Building C. "She even threatened to call animal control over my poodle because he barked during one of her inspections," said Marcus from apartment 214. Story after story emerged. Patricia had turned our community association into her own little kingdom of terror. 3 days after the incident, an envelope was delivered to our door. It had the HOA letterhead and a shaky signature from Patricia, a final attempt to keep control. Dear Roberts residents, it is with deep regret that I must inform you of the serious violation of Oak Haven's community rules. The assault on authorized administration staff represents a threat to the collective safety of our community. By unanimous decision of the Executive Board, we have decided to enforce the maximum penalty provided in our bylaws. You are to vacate your unit within 30 days, and a compensatory fine of $5,000 will be imposed. We regret that it has come to this. Sincerely, Patricia Lawson, President of the Homeowners Association. Sam laughed when she finished reading the letter. She really doesn't get the mess she's gotten herself into, does she? Our friend Roger, the lawyer, confirmed what we already suspected. The letter had no legal basis whatsoever. In fact, it was further evidence of persecution and abuse of power. She's bluffing, Roger explained in our kitchen over coffee. The so-called Executive Board never even met. I spoke with 2 members this morning. They're horrified by her actions and are considering a mass resignation. The icing on the cake came on the evening news. Patricia was being escorted out of the police station after posting bail, her face concealed from the cameras. The reporter explained that she was facing charges of conspiracy, attempted theft, and burglary. Sources indicate that this might just be the tip of the iceberg, the reporter said. Several residents of Oak Haven have already given statements about other possible abuses of authority. That night, my phone rang. It was Martin Green, the HOA vice president, a retired gentleman who rarely spoke up at meetings. Jack, his tired voice said, we're calling an extraordinary meeting for Sunday. The board is, well, we're in chaos. We need to address this transparently in front of all the residents. Could you attend? We'll be there, I replied, feeling both relief and apprehension. After I hung up, I found Sam at the garage door, looking at my tools which had now been returned by the police as processed evidence. You know, she said thoughtfully, when I was in the Navy, I learned that sometimes the most dangerous threats aren't the ones from outside, but those right under our noses, disguised as authority. I put my arms around her shoulders as I looked at our garage, a simple concrete space that had inadvertently become a battleground for something much bigger than the 2 of us. That Sunday arrived under an impeccably blue Texan sky, almost ironic for a day that promised so much tension. The Oak Haven Community Center, which is usually used for parties and recreational activities, looked completely different. Chairs were arranged in rows like in a courtroom. There was a raised main table where the party buffet used to be. Microphones were being tested by a nervous technician. I've never seen so many people here, I commented to Sam as we looked for a seat. Not even at Christmas. She squeezed my hand in response. She wore a simple navy blue shirt and dress pants, her uniform for serious situations, as she used to joke. I opted for a clean button-down, but kept my work boots. I didn't want to come off as trying too hard. The room was packed. Faces that we barely recognized from quick hellos in the halls now greeted us like old friends. Phones were out, ready to capture every moment. The story had far surpassed our community. A local newspaper reporter was discreetly waiting at the back of the room. Martin Green, the interim vice president, cleared his throat into the microphone at 10 sharp. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this extraordinary meeting on a Sunday. His voice trembled slightly. Recent events demand our collective attention and require important decisions for the future of our community. The 4 remaining board members sat uncomfortably at the table. 3 resignations had been announced on Friday, close allies of Patricia, who chose to leave before facing public scrutiny. Before we begin formally, Martin continued, I want to clarify that this meeting is being recorded, and the minutes will be available on our community portal. I also want to acknowledge the presence of Mr. and Mrs. Roberts, who were directly affected by the events we're discussing today. A murmur spread through the room as several glances turned toward us. Sam sat up straight, her chin held high, the same look I had seen in photos of her at military ceremonies. Our first item is to review the actions taken by Mrs. Lawson and the subsequent legal implications for the association. A middle-aged lawyer stood up, introducing herself as the emergency hired representative for the HOA. This is a serious situation, she said bluntly. Mrs. Lawson's actions have clearly exceeded her authority as president. Forcing entry into a private property, especially at night, is a criminal offense regardless of any clause in the bylaws. Slides appeared on the screen, outlining the potential legal consequences. The association faced potential civil liability, as well as reputational damage. The security guards hired for the break-in had already reached an agreement with the prosecutor to testify against Patricia. Ladies and gentlemen, she concluded, I strongly recommend that the association formally distance itself from Mrs. Lawson's actions and seek an out-of-court settlement with the affected family to avoid lawsuits that could result in significant costs for all homeowners. I've never been one for center stage. When Martin called me up to speak, I could feel every pair of eyes on me. Sam gave me a little nudge of encouragement. "I'm not here for revenge," I began awkwardly into the microphone. "I'm a mechanic, not a lawyer or a politician. All I've ever wanted was to do my job in peace, help anyone who needed a repair, and live quietly with my wife." I paused, looking around at everyone. What happened in my garage was more than just a break-in. It was an invasion of my dignity, of my trust. I believed that a neighborly association existed to protect us, not to threaten us in the middle of the night. I saw some people nodding, others looked down, perhaps embarrassed that we'd let things go so far. I'm not looking to punish the community for one person's mistakes. I don't want our common funds, meant for fixing elevators and taking care of the gardens, to be wasted on legal battles. But I do want assurances that this will never happen again, with anyone. When I finished, something I never expected happened. Applause. Not just polite clapping, but strong approval. People who barely exchanged a good morning in the elevator were now standing up to cheer. Then the meeting took an unexpected turn. A woman of about 70, whom I vaguely recognized from Building C, stood up with difficulty, leaning on a cane. "My name is Eleanor Wilkins, apartment 312. Her frail yet determined voice filled the room. "And Patricia Lawson threatened to evict me because my autistic grandson had a meltdown on the playground. She said that unruly kids hurt property values." The silence was broken by another voice. "James Chen, apartment 159. I got fined 3 times because my mother, who has Parkinson's, left garbage bags at the door for a few hours. Patricia said I was disrespecting the hallway's aesthetics." Like a dam finally giving way, stories began pouring out. Shy people finding courage in numbers. A Hispanic couple whose request for a wheelchair ramp was repeatedly denied. A university professor who got threats for giving piano lessons during unauthorized hours. Patricia hadn't just abused her power against us. She had created a regime of systematic intimidation, especially against the most vulnerable in the community. "This is bigger than just an isolated incident," Martin observed, visibly shaken by the testimonies. "We have a systemic problem that needs to be fixed." After 2 hours of testimonies, it was time to vote. Technically, it wasn't even necessary. Patricia had already been administratively removed while facing criminal charges. But the symbolism mattered. The community needed to have its voice heard. By an overwhelming unanimous vote, 136-0, Patricia Lawson was officially removed as HOA president. The bylaws were revised to include explicit limits on the power to enter homes and to establish checks and balances on executive authority. "To wrap up," Martin announced, "I propose a formal resolution apologizing to Mr. and Mrs. Roberts for what happened, and the establishment of a permanent ethics committee to prevent future abuses." More applause. Sam smiled discreetly, squeezing my hand under the table. When we left the community center, people who had only ever exchanged a quick good morning in the parking lot were now stopping to chat. They shared their own stories, offered help, and even asked when we could fix their cars. "You've become a local celebrity," Sam joked as we walked back home. "We both have," I replied. "You're the true heroine in this story." A week later, my garage was back to normal. Tools arranged neatly on the walls, the smell of grease in the air, the occasional sound of metal clashing. But something had changed. I put up a carved wooden sign above the main workbench. "This garage is protected by a former Navy officer, sharp tools, and American justice." Sam thought it was hilarious, especially when it started appearing in selfies from neighbors stopping by to say hello. Patricia sold her apartment and never returned to the community. Her lawyer worked out a deal with the prosecutor: probation, community service, and financial restitution. We later heard from reliable sources, the law office secretary from Building D, that she had moved to Arizona, presumably to start over somewhere her reputation wouldn't precede her. A month after the incident, we organized a barbecue in the shared backyard. It wasn't something we'd ever considered before. Gathering a large group, taking over a community space, making a bit of noise. But Oak Haven had changed. Or maybe it had always been like this, just waiting for someone to challenge the fear that kept us isolated. The new HOA president, Diane Rodriguez, a retired teacher from Building B, was the first to arrive, bringing a homemade potato salad. "You know," she said as she helped me fire up the grill, "I always thought associations were meant to bring people together, not tear them apart. I think we're on the right track now. I replied as I watched the patio gradually fill with neighbors, many meeting each other for the first time. Sam came over with a plate of burgers ready for the grill, smiling at the eclectic mix of people chatting happily. "Who would have thought that a garage break-in could bring so many people together?" she remarked, leaning on my shoulder. As kids ran across the lawn and adults shared stories and food, I realized one simple truth. Real security never comes from cameras, fences, or strict rules. It comes from the connections we build, from the courage to stand up for what's right, and from understanding that a strong community isn't one without conflicts, but one that solves them with fairness and dignity. "You know what's ironic?" I asked Sam as we watched the scene. "Patricia wanted to protect property values at all costs, but the real value has always been in the people." Eleanor Wilkins came over, her autistic grandson now casually playing with other kids without any fear of judgment. "You all have changed this place," she said simply, shaking our hands. "You've given it back to us." That night, I went back to my garage. The space that had been a battleground now felt even more sacred. Among my tools, with the distant echo of laughter coming from the backyard, I found a new appreciation for the power of small battles, the kind that aren't fought by armies or nations, but over principles and dignity. The garage war, as the neighbors affectionately called the incident, was over. But its impact would be felt far beyond the tools that Patricia so feared. In every more democratic HOA meeting, in every new neighbor welcomed with smiles instead of a list of rules, in every child now playing without the fear of making too much noise. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like to get access to more stories like this. Some battles are worth fighting not for what you win, but for what you prevent from being lost. And we almost lost something far more valuable than tools. The very essence of what it means to be a community.